Hey everyone, happy Monday. I hope you had a wonderful weekend. We are going to begin a new unit today called Testing and Individual Differences. And we're going to start in Module 60 with Introduction to Intelligence. Don't forget to jot down some notes and send me a picture, whether they are handwritten or typed, so you can get credit for that. All right, so we'll start with defining intelligence. This is the ability to learn from experience, solve problems, and to use knowledge to adapt to new situations. So this is not intelligence as you might think of it as school smarts or something like that. This is just generically the qualities that are necessary for you to succeed in your own time and in your own culture. So if you're in a farming community, having a knowledge of plants, how to put seeds in the ground, how to harvest, things like that, that might be a form of intelligence in a farming community. Whereas here in the United States, we look at intelligence as being able to do well in calculus or chemistry or APUSH, things like that. But in both places, intelligence is simply learning from experience, solving problems, and using what we know to adapt to new situations. So the question is intelligence one general ability, or is it several specific abilities? And as you know by now, there are going to be people who believe both of those things. All right, so Charles Spearman believed that we have one general intelligence. This is shortened to G. So you may see the term G factor. What this means is that there is one factor that underlies all areas of intelligence. You can see this is highly controversial. In an age where we give medals to everyone for participation, this seems really harsh. This idea that there is just one thing that makes you intelligent across the board. This is highly controversial. It was when he wrote it, and it still is controversial. And so he used factor analysis, which is just a statistical measure of a cluster of related items. So basically, he would give an IQ test, and if you scored high in one area, then the idea was that you would score high in other areas. So if you score high in verbal intelligence, you likely would score high in math or reasoning ability or spatial analysis. Okay, so obviously this was and is controversial. And so one of Spearman's earliest opponents was a guy named L.L. Thurstone. And he said, instead of just having one general factor, one G factor, he identified 7 different clusters of primary mental abilities by giving 56 different tests. And so he did not rank people based on one G factor, one scale of general aptitude. Instead, he identified different kinds of intelligence, like word fluency, verbal comprehension, spatial ability, perceptual speed, numerical ability, inductive reasoning, and memory. And so he said that instead of having one type of intelligence, you could have several. The problem with that is that research actually backs up the fact that typically if you score well in one area, you will score well in another area. And so you can kind of compare your mental abilities to physical abilities. We know that athleticism is not just one thing. It's not the ability to run fast or the ability to throw a ball or to have really good hand-eye coordination, but typically there is a tendency for these things to come packaged together. And so good athletes do tend to be fast. They do tend to have throwing accuracy and good hand-eye coordination, and it appears to be that way with intelligence too. And like I said, there is research to back that up. So yeah, there is a general ability that allows athletes to perform well. All right, so another theory of multiple intelligence is Gardner's theory. And so this is sometimes called the theory of multiple intelligence or Gardner's 8 intelligences. And he said, you guessed it, that there are 8 types of intelligence. And we'll just go through these one by one. He said that linguistic intelligence would be like people who can use words well. So whether they're writing or speaking, whether they're reading out loud or writing stories or memorizing, these people are linguistically intelligent. Another type of intelligence, according to Gardner, was logical mathematical intelligence. And so these people would be good at reasoning, good at recognizing patterns or thinking conceptually about numbers, relationships, patterns, basically good at math. He also said that there is musical intelligence. These people also think in patterns and rhythms and sounds. These people would tend to be good musicians, or they can remember songs or melodies, or they can play an instrument by ear. Another type of intelligence, according to Gardner, was spatial intelligence. And these people are good at visualizing. And so typically they're good at art. They memorize directions. You take them somewhere for the first time and they can find their way home because they are good at memorizing what things look like. He also said there's bodily kinesthetic intelligence. And this would be like people who are good at dancing or sports. They have good motor or hand-eye coordination. And the kinesthetic part would be that they are good at creating things with their hands. Intrapersonal intelligence would be like people who enjoy self-reflection. They usually have really good self-awareness. They analyze thoughts and theories and ideas. Typically, a philosopher or a theorist or a writer would have intrapersonal intelligence. Then there is interpersonal intelligence, and this would be, rather than looking inward, you would be good at understanding and relating to other people. And so these people are typically really good at assessing emotions, and they can, even in a conversation, they can figure out what people's motives and intentions are. Even if they're not verbally communicating them, they can kind of read through the lines. So a good salesperson, a politician, a psychologist, a counselor would likely have good interpersonal skills if they're successful. All right, another type of intelligence, and this would be number 8, is naturalist. And so this would be like somebody who likes to go camping or hiking, or they're a gardener. These people are typically in tune with nature, they're nurturing, they're good at categorizing and cataloging information. And so there's actually, Gardner later proposed another type of intelligence called existential intelligence. And this would just be the ability to ponder deep questions about life and the meaning of life. So that one was added later, but these are the 8 intelligences as identified by Gardner. All right, so along with that, I want to identify savant syndrome. This is a person who is extremely brilliant in one area, but they may have limited intelligence generally. One of the most famous savants in the movie Rain Man is about this guy. His name was Kim Peek, and he actually died recently. A lot of times people who are savants are also on the autism spectrum. This guy was not. He could memorize a whole page of writing in 8 to 10 seconds. So while he was alive, he memorized 9,000 books, including the Bible. He could go somewhere one time and then give you, read off GPS instructions on how to get there. But he could not button his shirt. And so he lacked general intelligence, but in other areas, he was extremely brilliant. There's actually a documentary about him if you're interested. Oftentimes, if we have time, I'll show it in class. I may include a link in the comments to that, but you can find it on YouTube. Just type in Kim Peek, Kimpeek. Brilliant guy. All right, so another theory of multiple intelligences is Robert Sternberg's three intelligences. And so he agreed with Gardner in the sense that there was more than one G factor. There's more than one type of intelligence or one factor that underlies all intelligences. But he said that there are three types, not 8 or 9 types of intelligence. And so he boiled it down to three things. The first one is analytical intelligence. And so this is usually assessed by intelligence tests. And typically this is like a math problem. So you have a well-defined problem with one single right answer. Generally, if you do well on this type of test, on an analytical problem-solving type intelligence test, this is a good predictor of how you will perform in school. He also said that there is a type of, that should be creative, not creating, intelligence. This is your ability to come up with creative solutions to problems, to use novel ideas, to demonstrate creativity when dealing with new situations. And then lastly, he said there's also a practical intelligence where you can solve everyday tasks. These tasks might be poorly defined, and it may be a type of task that has many different answers, but if you have practical intelligence, you will come up with the most practical answer to solve an everyday problem. All right, so looking at criticisms of multiple intelligence theories like Spearman and Gardner. The number one criticism is that research confirms the G factor. There is science to back up the fact that if you tend to be good in one area, if you tend to be intelligent in math, that you also will be intelligent in English. So there is science to back this up. Typically, if you do well in one thing, you will do well in another. Our book does point out the fact, though, that intelligence does not equal success. Success actually comes from a natural ability. Maybe you are naturally good at math or English or whatever, but it also is dependent on your grit, which is identified in an earlier chapter, but this is your passion and perseverance when you're pursuing long-term goals. And the general rule is the 10-year rule. And it says that in order to be an expert at anything, it takes about 10 years of intense daily practice. So on average, 11,000 hours to become a master at something, and a minimum of 3,000 hours. Okay, and lastly, some psychologists have pointed out that emotional intelligence is important. And this is a part of social intelligence, us interacting with other people. And psychologists like Edward Thorndike, which he's actually the one that came up with this in 1920, said that emotional intelligence was the best determinant for social intelligence. And people who are intelligent in one area might not do well on their job because they lack the ability to read and perceive emotions. And so there are a couple of parts to this. One is perceiving emotions. So you can look at someone's face and tell if they are happy or sad or angry or disgusted. You listen to music and you can tell if it's angry or if someone's in love, but you're good at perceiving emotions. Emotionally intelligent people also understand emotions. Not only do they discern them, but they can predict them, and they can figure out what might make a person go from happy to sad or angry to happy or whatever. The third factor here is you can manage your emotions. You know how to express your emotions in a healthy way in a variety of circumstances. And you can also help manage other people's emotions. In other words, if you notice that someone is getting extremely angry, you know how to bring them down a notch rather than escalating their anger. Another component to emotional intelligence is using emotions for adaptive or critical thinking. So not only can you perceive and understand emotions and manage them, but you can actually harness them in order to come up with creative solutions. All right, so that is all for now. I hope you guys have a great day, and don't forget to send me a picture of your notes.